Ready to see the future through the lens of the past? Welcome to Endtime Prophecy Stories. Here we dive deep into ancient mysteries and uncover what lies ahead in a world filled with uncertainty. But we can't do it without you. If you want to stay prepared and never miss a revelation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you find value in these stories, give this video a like. It helps us reach more truth seekers just like you. Now let's open the seal on today's story. Pharmakeia 3, the Mark of Sorcery and the 7 Last Plagues. Chapter 1, the Final Countdown. The air in Neos Babylon tasted of ozone and despair. Above the towering spires of the megacity, the firmament, the translucent crystalline dome that the system had tried so hard to hide, shimmered with the artificial projections of Pertholite Industries. It was no longer a secret. It was a prison. Allan Anderson crouched in the shadows of the sub-basement of the abandoned cathedral, the damp stone pressing against his back. He checked the display on his scavenged tablet. Time until enforcement, 119 hours. 5 days, Caleb whispered, his fingers flying across a holographic keyboard projected onto the dusty floor. The frantic energy upstairs is getting worse. Thorn has ramped up the frequency of the neural mesh emitters. The people they're vibrating, Allan. It's like a hive mind waking up. Allan looked at his group. They were the Remnant, the ones who had woken up when the Pharmakeia fog lifted and had refused the Ascension Link. There was Dr. Jensen, wiping his glasses nervously. Elena, sharpening a serrated combat knife. Thomas, their scout, who was checking the oxygen scrubbers. And Miriam, holding a sleeping child. "We can't stay here," Allan said, his voice low but steady. "The wild ceremony begins on the evening of the 5th day. That's when the Jesuit general and Thorn will activate the final lock. If we are inside the carbon steel perimeter when that happens, we're dead. Or worse, we're chipped." "The streets are crawling with Inquisition drones," Thomas reported, pulling up a grainy feed from a hacked street camera. "And the citizens, they aren't just reporting deniers anymore. They're hunting them. It's a sport." On the screen, the city of Neos Babylon was a neon nightmare. Holograms of Julian Thorn, the CEO of Pertholite and the false prophet of the age, floated between skyscrapers. "Unity is divinity," the digital voice boomed. "Prepare for the mark. Prepare for the light bearer." "We move tonight," Allan decided. "We head for the drainage sectors in the north. We take everyone we've gathered, the 40 in the back room, and anyone else we find on the way. We're going to the mountains." Chapter 2, the underbelly of the beast. The drainage tunnels were the veins of the old world, forgotten by the shiny, sterile overlay of the beast system. The group moved in silence, the only sound the splash of boots in the shallow, murky water. The density of the air down here felt heavy, a physical reminder of the enclosed plane they inhabited. They weren't alone. As they reached a junction beneath Sector 7, they found a huddle of terrified citizens, men and women who had missed the pre-registration window or whose conscience had flared up at the last second. "Help us," a woman begged, clutching a brochure for the Worship Enforcement Act. "My husband, he took it. He changed. His eyes, there's no light in them." "Come with us," Elena said, hauling the woman up. "But you have to keep moving. No noise." Suddenly, a screech echoed down the tunnel. A seeker bot, a serpentine mechanical drone designed to navigate pipes, slithered around the corner, its red optic lens sweeping the darkness. "Contact!" Thomas yelled, raising his EMP rifle. The drone hissed, a speaker embedded in its throat broadcasting the voice of the system. "Citizens, you are in an unauthorized zone. Submit to the Ascension Link or face immediate termination." Thomas fired. The pulse hit the drone, frying its circuits. It thrashed in the water, sparking before going dark. That scream will bring the Legion, Caleb warned. We have to sprint. Allan grabbed a crate of supplies. To the rail yard access. If we can hijack a maglev maintenance pod, we can punch through the inner wall. Chapter 3. The False Prophet's Decree. Neos Babylon was not just a city, it was an altar. As Allan's group surfaced near the industrial district on the third day, the sky was ablaze with holographic fire. Julian Thorne was addressing the worldwide population. His face, projected on the underside of the cloud layer, looked benevolent yet terrifying. The creator you feared is a myth, Thorne's voice thundered, shaking the very glass of the abandoned warehouse they hid in. The dome above us is not a shield, but an egg, and we are hatching. The mark is your hammer to break the shell. Lucifer, the morning star, waits to embrace his children. Dr. Jensen looked at Allan. He's inverting everything. He's using the truth of the enclosed world to sell the ultimate lie. That's how the papacy has always worked, Allan muttered, checking his map. Mix 90% truth with 10% lethal poison. The Jesuit general is pulling the strings. Thorne is just the puppet. They were close to the perimeter now. The wild ceremony preparations were visible. In the plazas, massive bonfires were being built, not of wood, but of books, Bibles, and history texts. People were dancing around them, their movements jerky, synchronized by the neural chips many had already accepted. It's a trance, Miriam whispered, covering the child's eyes. It's worship, Allan corrected. Enforced, chemically induced worship. We have 48 hours before the ceremony peaks. That's when the switch flips. Chapter 4. The Iron Gates. The outer perimeter of Neos Babylon was a wall of black carbon steel, rising 300 feet into the air. It was designed to keep the unclean out and the faithful in. Allan's group, now numbering over 100, huddled in the wreckage of a maglev station. The maintenance pod plan had failed. The tracks were severed. There's one way, Caleb said, looking at the schematics of the gate. The waste purge. Once a day, the city vents its chemical runoff. The sluice gates open for 4 minutes. That's suicide, Elena said. The toxicity levels. We have suits, Allan said, pointing to the hazmat lockers in the station. It's the only way. The ceremony starts tomorrow night. If we are here when the sun sets on the final day, the plagues begin. I can feel it. They donned the suits, the rubber cracking with age. They waited by the massive outflow pipes. The ground shook as the city above began its rhythmic chanting, millions of voices crying out to the light bearer. With a mechanical groan, the sluice gates began to rise. A torrent of sludge poured out. Go! Allan shouted. They waded against the current, the chemical slurry burning their skin even through the suits. They fought the flow, dragging the weak and the elderly. The stench was the smell of a dying civilization. As the last of their group scrambled through the opening and tumbled onto the rocky soil of the wasteland outside, the gates slammed shut. They lay on the gray earth, gasping. Behind them, the city glowed like a furnace. We're out, Thomas breathed. Not far enough, Allan said, looking at the distant purple line of the mountains. Run! Chapter 5. The Evening of the Mark. The 5th day. The sun was dipping low toward the edge of the plain, casting long, distorted shadows across the barren landscape. The group had pushed themselves to the brink of collapse, climbing the foothills of the jagged mountain range that bordered the sector. From their vantage point, they could see the city of Neos Babylon in the distance. It was pulsing with a rhythmic red light. The wild ceremony was at its apex. Allan set up a perimeter in a cave system known as the Cleft. It was high up, shielded by granite. Look, Miriam pointed. Over the city, a massive beam of light shot up from the central spire of Pertholite Industries, striking the firmament. The dome rippled. "They are trying to break through?" Jensen asked. "No," Allan said, opening his Bible to Revelation 16. "They are signaling their victory. They have enforced the mark. The door of probation is closed." As the sun touched the horizon beyond the last region in the west, a silence fell over the worldwide plain. It was a silence so deep it felt like the air itself had been vacuumed away. Then, the first bowl was poured. It didn't come from the sky, it came from within. Down in the city, the red pulsing light turned chaotic. Even from miles away, they heard the scream. It was a collective wail of millions. "The sores," Allan whispered. "Noisome and grievous sores upon the men which had the mark of the beast." The nanotech inside the people, the Ascension Link that Thorn had promised would bring godhood, had malfunctioned. Or perhaps it was functioning exactly as the Creator intended, rejecting the biology of the wicked. Chapter 6: The Year of the Ulcer. The first plague was a time of horror for the cities, but a time of supernatural protection for the remnant in the mountains. Allan and his community lived simply. They had found a spring of water deep in the cave, water that defied the drought outside. They ate simple food, rationed carefully. Down on the plain, the world was rotting. The reports they intercepted on the radio were fragmented. The sores were not healing. The medical bots of Pertholite Industries could not excise them. The sores were a physical manifestation of the corruption they had accepted. The Jesuit general had retreated to his bunker. Thorn was blaming terrorist biohackers for the plague, but the people were in too much agony to listen. The economy collapsed. Gold and silver were thrown into the streets. They could not buy pain relief. Psalm 91, Allan read to the group by the firelight. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. They watched the city lights flicker and die. The beast system was running on emergency power. Chapter 7: Blood in the Water, Plagues 2 and 3. The second plague brought the death of the sea. Allan stood on a peak, looking through a telescope at the distant ocean. It was no longer blue. It was a stagnant, coagulated red. The stench reached even the mountains. "Every living soul died in the sea," Jensen noted, documenting the judgment. "The ecosystem is gone." Then came the third plague. The rivers and fountains of waters turned to blood. In the mountains, Allan's spring remained clear, crystal clear. "Why us?" a young boy asked Allan, dipping a cup into the cool water. "Because we acknowledge the Creator," Allan said gently. "We kept his statutes. We kept the true lunar Sabbath. We refused the lie of the beast. This water is his promise." Below, the thirst was driving men mad. The beast's forces tried to march on the mountains, seeking the clean water. But they were weak, covered in sores and parched. They collapsed before they could reach the foothills, their high-tech armor useless against the judgment of God. Julian Thorn appeared on the few remaining screens. He looked gaunt, his synthetic skin peeling. He blasphemed the God of heaven, cursing the name of the Creator, refusing to repent. Chapter 8: The Season of the Scorpion, Plagues 4 and 5. The fourth plague, the sun, the localized light that circled the plain, intensified. It didn't expand, it focused. The heat became a physical hammer. "Power was given unto him to scorch men with fire," Allan recited. The cities became ovens. The carbon steel walls that were meant to protect them now cooked them. Men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, but the hail was yet to come. For now, it was fire. The fourth plague had scorched the world with fire, turning the cities into ovens. But the fifth brought a terror far worse than heat. It brought the opening of the abyss. It began on the first day of the fifth plague. A star, a massive burning projectile that was not a meteor, but an angel manifest in the physical realm, descended and struck the earth near the coordinates of the Vatican. It did not create a crater, it opened a shaft. Thick, unnatural smoke billowed from the pit, darkening the sun and the air. The darkness that fell upon the seat of the beast was not merely an absence of light, it was a tangible, suffocating obscenity. The solar panels of Pertholite Industries failed. The bioluminescent city grids flickered and died. But something moved in the smoke. Allan stood on the ridge of the cleft, watching through his thermal binoculars. The darkness below was absolute, but the sounds drifting up the mountain face were bone-chilling. It sounded like the thrumming of a billion wings, the roar of chariots rushing to battle. "The fifth trumpet and the fifth plague are one," Allan whispered, recalling Revelation 9. "The abyss is open." Out of the smoke emerged the locusts. They were nightmares made flesh, a grotesque fusion of the biological tampering Julian Thorne had encouraged and the demonic spirits the Jesuit general had worshipped. They were the size of horses, their bodies armored with scales that looked like iron breastplates. They had faces that mocked humanity, long hair that whipped in the wind, and teeth like lions. But their power lay in their tails. "Scorpions," Thomas breathed, racking the slide of his rifle, though he knew bullets were useless. "They have stings in their tails." The torment of the marked down in the blacked-out sprawls of Neos Babylon, the torment began. The locusts did not attack the grass, nor the few remaining green things, nor the trees. They had a specific target, the biological signature of the Ascension Link, those with the mark of the beast. The neural chip, once promised as the key to godhood, was now a beacon. Allan watched in horror as a swarm descended on a refugee column of city dwellers who had tried to flee toward the foothills. The locusts landed among them. The creatures did not kill. That was the cruelty of the fifth plague. A man, his forehead glowing faintly with the implant, screamed as a scorpion tail struck him. He fell, writhing in agony, his body convulsing. He reached for his sidearm, putting the barrel to his temple, desperate to end the pain. Bang! Then, more bone-chilling, agonizing screaming. "He can't die," Dr. Jensen said, his scientific mind deferring to the divine prophecy. "In those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them." The beast system had attempted to engineer immortality, and now God had turned their delusion into a 5-month prison of torture. The venom of the locusts targeted the nervous system, firing every pain receptor in the body simultaneously, the sensation of burning alive without the release of ash. For 5 months, the screams from the cities never ceased. It was a cacophony of regret, a choir of the damned. The shield of the sealed. But up in the mountains, the air was still. A single locust, separated from the swarm, buzzed up the canyon walls. It hovered near the entrance of the cave where Allan's group hid. Its multifaceted eyes, glowing with a hellish red light, scanned the group. Elena froze, clutching her knife. Miriam held the children tight, pressing their faces into her shoulder. The beast landed heavily on a rock just 10 feet away. The smell of sulfur and burning circuitry rolled off it. It chittered, its scorpion tail arching over its back, the stinger dripping with liquid fire. It looked directly at Allan. Allan didn't run. He stepped forward. He didn't have a weapon. He had the truth. He kept the Sabbath. He honored the creator of the enclosed world. He had the seal of God, not a chip in the flesh, but a settling into the truth so deep it could not be moved. The locust's sensors swept over him. It was looking for the frequency of the mark. It was looking for the spiritual void where the Holy Spirit used to dwell. It found neither. Instead, it recoiled. To the demonic entity, Allan and his group were covered in a terrifying brightness, the glory of the living God. The The command given to them in the abyss was absolute. Hurt only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. The creature shrieked, a sound of frustration and fear, and launched itself backward, diving back into the darkness of the valley to find prey that belonged to its master. "They can't touch us," Allan said, his voice trembling with awe. "We are invisible to the torment." For 5 long months, while the world below writhed in the darkness, seeking death and finding only pain, the remnant in the mountains walked in the light. They had bread, they had water, and they had peace. The distinction was made plain. The system of the beast offered technology and torture. The law of God offered obedience and protection. The 5 months ended, but the hearts of the wicked did not turn. As the pain subsided, the blasphemy only grew louder, setting the stage for the drying of the Euphrates and the final gathering for war. Chapter 9. The Gathering for Armageddon, Plague 6. The 6th plague saw the drying of the great river Euphrates. The barrier that held back the kings of the east was removed. "The spirits of devils," Caleb said, monitoring the frequencies. "Thorn is broadcasting again. He's calling for a final war." "Who are they fighting?" Elena asked. "They think they are fighting an alien invasion," Allan said sadly. "They are gathering to fight the return. Thorn has convinced them that the sky people are coming to enslave them, and they must unite one last time to break the firmament." The armies of the world, broken and battered, began to gather at Megiddo. It was a pathetic sight. Men with sores, blind and thirsty, dragging their high-tech weapons toward a battle they could not win. The deception was absolute. Even in their agony, they believed the Jesuit general's lie that they could defeat the Almighty. Allan gathered his people. "The time is close. We won't know the day or hour, but the 7th plague is beginning." Chapter 10. The Sky Rolls Back. The 7th plague. It began with a voice. It rolled across the flat plain of the earth like thunder, yet it was articulate. "It is done." The air turned into a vacuum. Then, the great earthquake. The mountains shook, but Allan's cave stood firm, cradled by the hand of providence. The cities of the nations fell. Neos Babylon crumbled into dust. The great islands fled away. Then came the hail. Stones the weight of a talent, huge, jagged blocks of ice, crashed down from the firmament, crushing the armies gathered at Armageddon. Allan ran to the entrance of the cave. The sky was departing as a scroll when it is rolled together. The firmament split. The deception of the globe was shattered forever. The blackness of the false space was ripped away, revealing the burning, unapproachable light of the throne above. And he appeared, not as a humble carpenter, but as the King of Kings. The armies of the beast turned their weapons upward, a futile gesture of ants against a supernova. Julian Thorn and the Jesuit general were captured, their lies exposed in the brilliance of his coming. Allan fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The struggle, the escape, the years of watching the world die, it was over. "This is our God," Allan whispered, echoing Isaiah. "We have waited for him, and he will save us." The pre-apocalyptic world was gone. The kingdom had arrived. Epilogue. The Millennium and the New Earth. 1. The Sea of Glass. The transition was not sleep, nor was it death. For Allan and his group, the remnant who had stood firm in the mountains while the world dissolved, it was an instantaneous translation. One moment they were watching the sky recede like a scroll. The next, they were standing on a surface that looked like mingled fire and ice. It was the Sea of Glass. Allan looked down. There was no density pulling him, only a weightlessness of spirit. He looked around and saw a multitude that no man could number, but distinct among them was a specific company. They were the 144,000, those who had been redeemed from the earth alive, having survived the time of trouble without seeing the grave. But they were not alone. As the 1,000 years of the Sabbath millennium began, thrones were set in place. Allan watched as those who had been beheaded for the witness of Jesus, those who had refused the mark of the beast in the city dungeon of Neos, Babylon, and paid with their lives, took their seats. The courtroom was vast, set within the celestial temple. The rest of the righteous dead, resurrected at the coming of the King, stood as witnesses. The books were opened, not to decide the fate of the saved, for they were already there, but to vindicate the justice of God regarding the lost. "We judge the angels," Dr. Jensen whispered, his eyes scanning the records of history. They saw the machinations of the Jesuit general, the technological sorcery of Julian Thorne, and the dark whispers of the fallen spirits that had deceived the nations. For 1,000 years, the saints reviewed the cases, ensuring that every judgment made by the Creator was transparent and just. 2. The solitary plane. Meanwhile, far below the firmament, the earth was a wreck of silence. The cities were dust. The mountains had been moved out of their places. There was no light, for the sun and moon had been darkened, and the glory of the Lord had withdrawn to the third heaven. Satan, the great dragon, wandered the desolate plain alone. He was bound, not with chains of iron, but with chains of circumstance. There was no one left to tempt. The righteous were in heaven, the wicked were dead, their bodies scattered across the wasteland, consumed by the brightness of the Lord's coming. For 10 centuries, the adversary was forced to roam the broken architecture of his own making. He walked the ruins of the Vatican, the shattered glass of Pertholite Industries, and the empty pits of the abyss. He had claimed he could run the world better than the Creator. Now, he was the king of a graveyard, left to contemplate the misery his rebellion had wrought. 3. The descent. When the 1,000 years were finished, a change rippled through the cosmos. Allan stood at the gate of the holy city, the New Jerusalem. It was a city of pure gold, like unto clear glass, its dimensions perfect. A command was given, and the city began to descend. It moved through the opened firmament, coming down from God out of heaven. It settled upon the earth, not on the ruined soil, but on a vast plain purified for its arrival. The Mount of Olives cleaved in two to make a way. Inside the city, the light was brilliant, for the Lamb was the light thereof. But outside, the second resurrection began. 4. The final deception. Arise! The voice did not come from God, but from the necessity of justice. The earth gave up the dead that were in it. The sea of blood gave up the dead that were in it. Billions of people, the wicked from every age, including the armies of the beast that had perished at Armageddon, stood up. They were not glorified. They rose with the same rebellious spirits they had died with. They looked at their bodies, healed of the plagues, but still mortal, still corrupt. And Satan was loosed from his prison. He appeared before them, not as a defeated prisoner, but as a majestic general of light. He moved among the resurrected billions, the Caesars, the dictators, the false prophet Thorne, and the Jesuit general. "I have raised you," Satan lied, his voice booming across the flat plain. "I have snatched you from the grip of the tyrant. Look!" He pointed to the shimmering city that had descended. "That city belongs to us. We have the numbers. We have the strength. We will take it by force." The deception took hold instantly. The unrighteous, unrepentant, and filled with the same hatred for God's law they had held in life, organized into the final army, Gog and Magog. They fashioned weapons from the debris of the old world. They marched across the breadth of the earth, surrounding the camp of the saints and the beloved city. 5. The Great White Throne. Allan watched from the walls of Jasper. The sea of enemies was endless, pressing against the city gates. They prepared to batter down the doors. Suddenly, the sky above the city vanished. A great white throne appeared, suspended in the air. The presence of the one sitting upon it was so overpowering that the earth and the heaven fled away. The attack stopped. The silence returned. The books were opened again, this time visible to those outside the walls. The wicked saw their lives played out, every secret sin, every rejected plea of the Holy Spirit, every moment they had chosen the lie of the globe or the mark of the beast over the truth of the Creator. It was not a negotiation, it was a realization. The deception of Satan broke. They saw him for what he was, a liar and a murderer. Then, the knee bowed. Julian Thorne fell to his knees. The Jesuit general collapsed in prostration. Every soul on the plain, from the dawn of time to the final plague, bowed and confessed that Jesus Christ is Lord. They did not bow in love, they bowed in the crushing weight of undeniable truth. They acknowledged the justice of their sentence. 6. The consuming fire. The judgment was pronounced. Fire came down from God out of heaven. It was not the torturous, never-ending fire of Dante's imagination, but the cleansing, consuming fire of Sodom and Gomorrah, the strange act of a loving God removing cancer from his universe. The fire fell upon the armies. It fell upon the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. It devoured them. It cleansed the surface of the earth, burning away the plastic, the silicon, the bones, and the sin. It melted the elements with fervent heat. Allan watched as the flames did their work. There was no joy in the destruction of the wicked, only the solemn peace of justice being satisfied. The smoke of their destruction rose up, and then it ceased. They were ashes under the soles of the feet of the righteous. They were gone. The universe was clean. 7. The earth made new. The fire that consumed the wicked purified the plain, and from the city the voice of God spoke, echoing across the eternal plain. Behold, I make all things new. From the ashes new life sprang up. Allan walked out of the city gates, his feet touching the renewed earth. It was the Edenic design restored. The firmament above was a perfect crystalline canopy, glowing with the soft light of the Creator's glory. There was no more sea. The separating chaotic oceans were gone, but the river of life flowed from the throne, watering the valleys. The wolf dwelt with the lamb. The curse of density, of decay, of death was no more. Allan found his family. He found the group that had huddled in the cave. They looked at one another, their bodies glorified, shining like the sun. The controversy is ended, Allan said, looking out over the perfect, flat horizon that stretched endlessly before them. Sin and sinners are no more. The entire universe is clean. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. The end.
For more Bible-based end-time prophecy dramas to strengthen your faith and the faith of others, help spread the word by supporting the channel. Please like, subscribe, and share.